Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. How's it going? Glad to be back here again. I had my usual Thursday mass over at the nursing home, which of course won't happen next week because it's Thanksgiving. And I was really struck by our reading today, first reading, where it was really the beginning of the Maccabean revolt, where the Jews were trying to force people to renounce the Jewish religion, to renounce their Jewish culture, really, and become good Greeks. And we see where the revolt started, where there was, official of the king, if I remember right. I don't have the reading up in front of me, but official of the king was killed, and then the leaders led them off into the wilderness, off to the mountains, off to the desert, to really start this revolt. And struck by it, not so much because of the need for violence to protect the Jewish culture, the fight, as important an event as the Maccabean revolt was within the history of Judaism, but this idea of going off and retreating from the world. If I remember right, it talks about how some of the believers went into the desert to practice the Mosaic law, to practice the Jewish faith. And I know there's a mindset in our country today. There's people who really want to consider building small communities that are Catholic, that we can live as Catholics, that we can do our lives as Catholics and not have any outside interference, get away from the world. And I know I've joked about buying some land out in the middle of nowhere and setting up, a little hermitage cabin type of thing, where I can get away from everybody. And one of the key things I'm going to look for is not scenery, not, resources. Where does this not work? Where does my phone not work? It's kind of one of the big things, is where I can't be reached. When I'm out there, you can't get a hold of me. You'd have to literally come out there to find me. But that's probably not going to happen, because that's going to cost more money than I'll ever have, first of all. Secondly, I don't know if I'd want something quite that isolated. It would be nice once in a while, again, to just have the quiet. But I don't know why Google decided to wake up, but whatever. I probably alerted it. But there's someone who wants to say, well, let's buy, a ranch somewhere and build a community that's just Christian. And some will call it like the Benedict option, this idea of retreating and kind of clustering up. Now, admittedly, I've not read Rod Bennett's book. Not Rod Bennett. I'm sorry, I forgot who the author was, but the Benedict option, the book about the Benedict option. I think it's Rod Dreher. Rod Dreher. Sorry, I'm doing this off the top of my head. That's part of doing it live. Can't edit it. But anyways, the book about the Benedict option, this idea where Benedict called us to kind of develop. Rod Dreher. Thank you. Yes, I knew I was close, but I wasn't 100%. Thanks, Scott. That we cluster up. We gather as community. I don't think is what I recall when Pope Benedict was talking about this, he really wasn't talking about this idea of developing a whole rural community, that we are completely self-sustaining, isolated, living as Catholics in that kind of world. Could something like that happen? Possibly. I don't see it as likely, though. What I think is the better option as Catholics, what we need to do is not so worried about getting away from the world, but having place where we can go to kind of retreat from the world temporarily to strengthen ourselves. Because ultimately, as Catholics, we are called to live our faith publicly, and that our faith should influence our daily lives, and that we should be the example to the world. And we can't do that, first of all, if we're isolating ourselves from the rest of the world. But we still need a place where we can strengthen our faith and go forward. That is what the Maccabean revolt did, was go out to the world, or go, retreat to the mountains, retreat to the desert to strengthen themselves. But then it was to prepare for the revolt, the actual combat, developing the army and everything. Obviously, we're not called to do that either. But we still need to have some place where we can retreat to strengthen our faith, and then go out and live that faith as an example in the world. And honestly, I think the place where we can see that the most is something we already have, and that's our parishes, our Catholic parishes, whether they're a small one like I have here, or the big mega parishes in some cities where there's 10,000 parishioners a part of it. Our parishes should be that place where we come together as a community, where we are where our community feeds us, strengthens us, gives us the resource we need to then go out and face the world. And of course, the sacraments are the biggest part of that. Receiving the Eucharist, receiving the sacrament of confession, anointing, there's confirmation, all these sacraments that we receive, and the ones that we receive on a regular basis, like the Eucharist and confession. We should be seeking to do that as much as possible. But we also need to grow our parishes so that they're not just sacrament machines. I think we look at them that way right now a little too often, where the parish exists to give us the sacraments and to do funerals and weddings. And of course, that's the sacraments, and that's it. We don't see the parish as a place where we gather as Christians to be strengthened, to have our faith strengthened. I think that's one of the big problems we have in our church today is we don't see the parish as a center of our lives. That, our families should be the center of our lives. The Vatican Council talked about families as the domestic church, that's first and foremost should be the center of our lives, that we live as Christians first and foremost in our families. Then we should be seeing our parishes, our neighborhood parishes, as centers of our community. Again, we're not doing it. And I know some of it is because of issues in parishes where, let's be honest, we have parishes in the church in the United States that aren't faithful to being Catholic. They're more concerned about this issue or that issue or being a certain type of parish and not being a community parish that seeks to draw all to Christ, not just certain people of a certain mindset. And this is on both sides. This is both liberal and conservative. There are parishes that their focus is being the conservative parish in the town. Whether they would express that or not is a different story. But there are other parishes that are the liberal parish. We are the inclusive, welcoming parish versus we are the traditional Latin Mass parish. Those in themselves are not bad things. But your average rank and file parish, your average parish in your average town, which is a community parish, it's your regional, your territorial parish, should be a place where anybody can come and be fed. Now, some of that is on my part as a priest. For me as a priest, my job is to make that happen. And that's a big question. I would love to hear what others think need to happen. What you're welcome. As long as you're not someone who's belligerent, as long as you're not someone who's going to do harm, there's obviously limitations. We don't want someone who is violent, for example, coming in there and being violent. We need to protect from things like that. But just because you might disagree with the theology of the pastor, or the pastor might disagree with your theology, or you look at things from two different views, should not be a reason why you're unwelcome. In fact, you should be welcome to help have that discussion. Again, as long as you're not belligerent about it. That's a whole nother argument. But parishes need to be welcoming, and we need to be able to share and talk with each other and learn from each other and grow with each other and support each other. And that does start with the pastor. If the pastor is not encouraging that, it's not going to happen. But it's not just the pastor. The pastor isn't the only one to do that. It also is the parishioners. When you see parishes where there's so much gossip and lies and this group versus that group and infighting and arguing, and sometimes arguing over things that are trivial. The old story of, someone goes to visit a parish and they sit down in a pew and the little lady stands there and glares because they were in my pew. I've seen stuff like that. That's not just a story. That happens where you have the lady who has sat in that pew for 50 years and her kids have sat there and her grandkids have sat there and that's her pew. Well, guess what? Someone else is there. Find another pew. It's not that big of a deal. And we shouldn't make it a big deal. Yes, we like to sit where we like to sit. And there are people who like to sit in the way back. First of all, move up. Come on, seriously, move up. I've had masses where there's 20 pews between, no, not 20 pews, but 10 pews between me and the first person. Move up, especially if you've got people coming late so that they can use those pews instead of having to walk in front of everybody to find a pew. But I mean, that's the kind of thing that we need to change, that mindset of my pew. No, you don't have pews. This is the parish's pew. You sit where you can, please. If people don't feel welcome in a parish, the parish isn't going to be a place that's going to feed them. We need to be looking at opportunities, not just for catechesis. Catechesis is important. Adult catechesis is very important. A lot of parishes, I think, try, but aren't always the most successful. It works sometimes, but sometimes it doesn't. But there needs to be more devotional life, spiritual life, adoration. I talked, last week about the need for Eucharistic adoration. We're going to believe in the Eucharist more if we're doing Eucharistic adoration. Parishes need to be looking for opportunities for things like this. And again, this is something that is not just the pastor's job. It's not just the staff's job. It's all of our job. Scott says, for a few years, we had weekday mass, a small setting in the church basement set, and the 3 rows were pretty close. As soon as the new pastor moved him back upstairs, everyone spread way out and sat away from the front as much as possible. Yeah, I really don't. I understand the idea of doing it in the main parish, because I've seen parishes where they have a day chapel, and the main parish doesn't get used except for weekdays. And that's a decision that I think parishioners need to make, that if we are going to use the main church, we don't have to sit spread out. Yeah, I figured you weren't complaining about moving upstairs. I figured you weren't. It's just it's one of those things of, just because you can does not mean it might be the best thing for the community. Because I have daily mass here, and ours, we have about 250 people can sit in the church if we pack it out with folding chairs. And it'll be 20 rows or something like that, and I'll have somebody who sits all the way in the back, and it's like, why? Yeah, even with the pastor saying feel free to sit close. Exactly. It's just, and that's human nature. We want kind of our space, and if we can take the space, it's funny because I've heard several times, I've heard this several times, several different places, that on average, like I said, my parish will seat 250, but if we're not packing people in, if you don't have ushers getting people to move in, only about 80% of the space will actually get used. So, I mean, you quick off the, top of my head math, that's probably about 200 people, 225 people at most will fit in there comfortably before people have to start pushed in. That's human nature. We're going to take as much space as we can. We like to spread out. Of course, I live in Montana, where we're the land of spreading out. But I mean, I think that's kind of that's one thing when it's the daily mass crowd, and it's, there is a lot more space. It's the typical Sunday mass is more what I'm concerned about, where you'll have someone come from out of town. You'll have a visitor. You'll have someone who's new to the community, who just moved into the area. And the first time they go to the parish, they get a dirty look from someone because they sat in their pew. And instead of just saying, hey, I normally sit here, but hey, glad to have you, I'll join you. That's a different way of saying it. Still sit in your pew. Just say, hey, can I join you? This is where I usually sit, and I'd like to meet new friends. That might be a better way to do it. So it's one thing, when it's a daily mass and everybody's spread out. It's another thing when it's, again, a normal weekend mass and there's someone new. But it's that kind of thing. I think parishes really need to be the center of our spiritual community, and places where we can go on retreat. I mean, how many parishes actually do a real retreat? Not like a mini retreat or an evening of recollection, which are very good, very, very, very good things. But when's the last time a parish ever said, we are going to have a weekend-long retreat from Friday evening for supper to Saturday evening for supper, and everybody is invited, people are invited to, and they'll stay there and they'll retreat and they'll be quiet except for the weekend mass or whatever. That would be a wonderful thing. Sad part is, I don't think most parishes are really set up for it. If nothing else, to be set up for a place where people can stay for a weekend and have the facilities like, bedrooms, showers, stuff like that. We really don't have it. But fortunately, we also have a lot of retreat houses in many dioceses. So that helps too. But parishes should be able to do stuff like that. Parishes should be the place where we think of when there's any kind of spiritual need. It should be immediately, I'm coming to my parish. That's kind of my point, is with all the issues we have in parishes, I think the biggest one is we don't develop that spiritual grounding in the parish, that the parish is the spiritual center of our lives, that we are fed by that. But then once we are fed in the parish, we then go out and live our lives and live our faith as active Christians, and that's where the difficulty comes in, is saying, I come to be fed at the parish. I get my spiritual growth. I get my spiritual development. I get my spiritual food and drink, literally with the Eucharist, and then go out and proclaim our faith and proclaim what we believe and what we live. So that's kind of my encouragement. Oh, I just heard someone go by. I thought they were pulling in. That's my encouragement, and I want to hear from parishioners, from people. What are things that we can do as parishes, other than the obvious, just don't be jerks, make sure when someone calls that they get, a secretary who's not bitter or aggressive. Unfortunately happens sometimes. Make sure that when they need something, that the parish can do its best to fill its needs. And that is a challenge. That's a challenge for me as a small parish, but I know it's a challenge for big parishes as well. It's a hard thing, but parishes should be the front of our spiritual development. So that's just throwing something out there. I hope. I'd like to hear more. I'd like to hear what others think. Please leave comments. Leave comments on this post, on this YouTube site, on the YouTube post, whatever. I want to hear what other people think, because there is a lot of that needs to be done, and we need to develop these communities, especially since we do have a culture that is becoming more and more aggressive towards Christianity. We need to live our faith, and we need to be bold with it. So anyways, that's enough of that. Just kind of from yesterday, I talked about we've got a snowplow coming for our lawn tractor, and as I said, he couldn't make it because the roads were bad. Well, he's on the way now. He won't be here for another hour or so it's not a big deal. But I'm kind of looking forward to getting that done, because it was kind of a pain to clean up everything yesterday after our snow. And the snowblower worked, but it does not like really wet, dense snow. And this was really wet, dense snow. So it'll be nice to have that plow to kind of push some of it off. It'll definitely make it a lot quicker, a lot easier. So I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully, I won't be able to test it because I've already cleared all the walks, but I might be able to find a place to go and test and have a little bit of fun with it, like on our courtyard or something like that. But I'm looking forward to him getting here. It's going to be interesting. Something I've never done before is used a blade on the front of a lawn tractor. So that'll be fun. It's a new toy. If people who know me knows I like my toys. Well, this is a new toy. So got that going on. Looking forward to it. And next time we have snow, I'll be able to pull the lawn tractor out and do it, and then use that to clear most of it. I'll still have use for the snow blower. There's our courtyard back here is a little tight for trying to get the tractor in, at least through the fence, through the gate. So that gate. So I'll have to use the push mower or push snow blower for that part, but the rest of the lot I should be able to do, and it'll be nice to be able to use it to clear some of the parking lot. It's not going to be a big blade. I think it's probably a 40 or 42 inch blade. Yeah, 74 or 46 there. It's well, my thermometer is showing 42, but I think I know it's in the sun, so it's still probably upper 30s. Let's see here. Let's do the old. What's the temperature outside? Let's see what Google says.
The temperature in Malta right now is 32.
Oh.
Due to current wind conditions, it feels like it's 24.
Well, it's 32 with wind. What else is new? It's jacket weather, Google says. Yeah. So it's melting. The sidewalks are kind of melting off a little bit where it got kind of icy and nasty, but it'll be fun to play with that. I think it is supposed to get warmer over the next couple of days, so that'll be good too. We like our warmer weather when we can get it, although it's definitely not a heat wave yet. It could be soon though. It hasn't been too bad of a winter yet. We've had one night where it got below zero, but next day it was 50 degrees. So it's one of those kind of weather patterns where it gets cold for a day or two and then it gets warm, and now it's kind of getting cool again. So anyways, that's that's what's going on around here. And I thank everyone for watching, and God bless.